You're plugged into the speaker, right? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very, very much for joining this 5JA webinar focused on showcasing the work that has been recently completed, all about introducing a framework for dynamic trustworthiness assessments in cooperative and automated vehicles. My name is Dominic. I am part of the 5JA Secretariat, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. We are joined by the two speakers who are also took the lead for the work and for completing this work themselves. I will hand the floor over first to Yanis and then to Alexander to quickly introduce themselves before running through some basic housekeeping rules to make sure that this webinar moves smoothly. Yanis, when you're ready, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dominic. So my name is Yanis Krontiris, and I am a senior researcher at Huawei Technologies in Munich, and I have been co-chair of the Working Group 7 in 5JA for quite a few years now, and I was the editor of the white paper that we just published on trust assessment.
Thank you very, very much, Yanis. Alexander, please.
Okay, so hi everybody. So I'm Alex Keening. So I'm in DENSO, Germany, also located in the Munich area. I'm technical researcher in many different ways, including connected mobility. And in this white paper, we were contributing on the use case and on the definition of the required level of trustworthiness.
Thank you very, very much. So I see people are still, there are still people joining, so we'll give it another couple of minutes before we begin. But just whilst we're waiting, it's a kind reminder to all of you that all of the attendees' microphones will be muted throughout the duration of this workshop. However, I encourage all of you throughout to include any questions, comments that you may have in the Q&A in the Q&A tab that you should all be able to see running across the top of your screen. We will make sure that we will be monitoring the questions and comments throughout the webinar, and we will make sure to share them at the end with the two speakers so that you get the answers that you require. Just a small disclosure, if for whatever reason we're not able to get through all of the questions, then we will, of course, send them to the speakers after the webinar and we'll follow up with you accordingly. You're also very welcome to put in any questions you have about 5GAA or, possible membership, anything like this, additional work. Feel free to put it in the Q&A and I will follow up with you bilaterally. With that in mind and without further delay, I'd like to hand the floor over to Yanis, our wonderful Vice Chair for Group 7, who led this work item. Yanis, please, the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let me see. Okay, so you must be able to see my first slide. So just to start with a brief introduction about the problem of trust in connected and automated mobility. It has been one of the core concepts in 5GAA for quite a few years now, a couple of years, because I think it is quite obvious that if we don't solve the problem of trust in V2X messages, they cannot be adopted broader in the automated mobility concepts. So we have been the goal of able to quantify trust, how we are able to assess trust in this environment, in V2X environment, and we have been also looking at side problem, which is not only look at the V2X messages, but also look at the MEC dimension, which is also very relevant in 5GAA, and also look in the in-vehicle dimension, where you might have migration of processes from one ECU to another ECU, for example. What is the same, common dimension in all these three problems is how can we assess the trustworthiness of a node, of an entity, of an agent who is either giving us data, either computing data, or has sensors and producing data, or an ECU that is has some computing capabilities and so on. Or if for example, somewhere where we can offload in the MEC, a process in the MEC where we can offload computations from the vehicle. Okay, so I think it has been an open problem. When we started, a lot of people were saying that the problem of trust in V2X has been solved since many years, because in ETSI it's already standardized the PKI framework, which sets up a trust framework for V2X, which is right, but it solves only the problem of the communication channel, right? It doesn't solve the problem of trust in the entity producing the data, for example, in the V2X messages, and how much you can trust the data and not the communication channel. It's not enough to know that the channel is secure to have trust on the data. Obviously, I will come to the next slide on this again. So these three problems have been studied and solve the problem of quantifying trust. for V2X in a European research project, which has been the base of the work that we are also presenting in the white paper. Both Huawei and DENSO have been partners in this European project. But many other, and also Intel when it was a member of 5GAA, but many other partners have been contributing to this work. It's a collaborative work. It's not mine or Alex, but I think it's collaborative work of a big consortium for 3 years. It started in September 2022, and it ended actually just 2 months ago, end of August 2025. And so it's a good timing that we also finished the white paper and had it adopted and endorsed in 5GAA at the same time. And so everyone reading the white paper can also go to the website of this European project. All the deliverables are public and can dig into a lot of details. And there are many, many deliverables describing things in a big detail. And also there are 3 use cases that Connect has, where they, they had trials. We had trials on testing and experimenting and demonstrating a lot of functionality in practice. But in this white paper, we used our own use case to motivate the problem, and also to apply the methodology on our own use cases, which was one use case that was more interesting for the 5GAA environment, and we chose the automated emergency brake use case, which brings the problem of trust quite easily. We have 2 vehicles. The vehicle in the front brakes suddenly, and also broadcasts this information into DENM and CAM messages, so that the vehicle behind it can realize and receive this information, realize that something is happening in the vehicle in front, but also the vehicle, the receiving vehicle on the back has also its own sensors, and can also understand with these sensors if there is an object in front of it that is cutting speed very fast. And so this combination of both inputs is coming to the ADAS or in any kind of logic where there is a decision being taken, where we have action taken. The action to be taken is to brake or not to brake. So we took this as a reference use case to test the methodology, to see, how much the data and the information coming from the other vehicle, how much can we trust, and then take a decision whether to use it for the decision, or in any case, then give it as to the logic of taking the decision to act accordingly. So again, back to the problem of how to solve the problem of trust in this case. I think it's one of the most important realization is that it's a dynamic problem. It's a problem where we have a very big threat domain with many different kind of threats. Speaking from the security point of view, but not only. There are many threats that are happening on the road, attacks that can happen in many different aspects, like not only the communication channel, but in-vehicle attacks or infrastructure attacks. there's a big, also I think in the deliverable, in the white paper, we have a chapter about it where we discuss this different kind of attacks. So that means that any assessment on the trustworthiness of the data should be dynamic, should be happening on the spot, on the moment where you receive the data and you want to use it, and not based on only on static information about the state of the vehicle before or when it exits the factory, or in a more static aspects. So both would be relevant here. So it is, we may try to define formally what it means for us, dynamic trust, in 5GAA, and use it as a concept also in other working items, working on the same problem from different perspectives. And then we defined it as the likelihood that vehicle B that we are trying to assess if we can trust it or not exhibits behavior within a context, specific context, to a specific level established by evidence E. So that means two things. First of all, that we give a level to it, we quantify, we say a number, and also it means that this number will be based, this assessment, this quantification will be based on evidence that we receive from the other vehicle, or that we have about the other vehicle from other channels, and we use this evidence to produce this quantification. And also, I would also point to the word likelihood, which is exactly giving us this idea that trust is probabilistic. We cannot have certainty only, but we also have always some uncertainty, and also we have to be able to incorporate the concept of probabilistic assessment, which is counterintuitive when we discuss, for example, about safety or about security. But this is the whole idea is that first of all, you cannot avoid it, because we are talking about agents outside our domain. So one vehicle receiving can never be absolutely sure what is going on in another vehicle from another OEM that is on the street and maybe under attack or whatever. So security attacks or any other threats. So uncertainty will always be there. The challenge is to quantify this uncertainty. And if we are able to quantify this uncertainty, we can also take action, decide if we want to take action based on what we want to do with this information. This is the context part of this sentence here. It always depends on also to what you want to do with it. What is the function that you want to use it for? So the evidence, coming back to the evidence has to come from a source, and we have a big list of different kind of sources, of different kind of evidence. I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but it can be sources from related to security, related to privacy, related to safety, related to accuracy of sensors, misbehavior detection, any kind or hardware level concepts or any kind. So the methodology doesn't restrict itself to this kind of what kind of properties we want to assess here for trust and what kind of evidence we want to use. It's depends mostly on what we want to assess for what. This will come in the example, maybe it will become more obvious. So like I said, if we need to quantify the uncertainty, there is a big challenge on what kind of mathematical models we have to use to do it. And there's a big discussion in the white paper arguing between comparing different models and different tools that are out there. And the conclusion of this discussion is that the best fit for what we need to do here is to use subjective logic, which is a theory not established by us. It's established in the last few years by the international community and academic community, with Yozang being one key person. But in any case, it is available. So we used it because it solves two big problems or needs that we have when we want to compute trust. The first one is that in this kind of multi-agent environment, we receive evidence, we receive information from other agents. And this is a kind of referral trust. So someone is telling us how much we can trust it. It is sending us evidence about how much we can trust this information that is sending us, but it's not more than a referral about this information. So we have to discount it based on how much we trust the entity that is telling us this. So it's also not necessarily the only piece of evidence or the only piece of information we receive, but maybe we receive different ones from different sources. And then we need to fuse them together and increase our uncertainty or certainty about this. And this fusion, again, is some kind of property that we need the model to support. So fusion and discounting is one of the strong points of subjective logic, and that's why we use it. When it comes to evidence, I have one slide, but I don't want to go too far here, but Connect put a lot on evidence coming from roots of trust that are based on trusted computing, that shows real-time runtime attestation of the vehicle ECUs and the sensor device characteristics. For example, the device configuration, the integrity of the executed software, and so on. And this kind of evidence or claims coming out of these roots of trust, for example, trusted execution environment, or any lightweight root of trust that we can have in the vehicle, can be sent to other vehicles, and also in a way that you don't give in or give out a lot of confidential information or privacy information about the sender, the vehicle. So in a way that it can be verified, but not disclosing sensitive information. That is a kind of computer science challenge that Connect solved. But here again, it's one possible source and one possible kind of evidence. So the methodology itself doesn't really restrict itself on this specific the aspect. And then after this assessment that we do at the receiving side about the trust level, we call it actual trust level, ATL. It's the result of our trust assessment, and then we need to decide to use it or not to use it. And like I said before, this depends on what we want to use it for, and therefore we defined also the required trust level, which is how much do we need to trust it so that we use it for braking, for example, in our use case. And this RTL is another number, we need to compute based on the functionality we want to have to use it for. And Alex will elaborate about the methodology for the RTL, how to compute this RTL. But I will first say a few words how to compute the ATL. So it's a little bit long in the white paper to describe this methodology. I will try to keep it very high level. Actually, I thought I'd just use the use case example and kind of very high level compared to how it is described in the document. But basically, it comes down to 5 steps. The first one is to create a kind of proposition, expression of what we need to evaluate. For example, here we want to evaluate 2 properties, for example, when we receive the data from the other vehicle in front of us. One property on the integrity of the data and one property on the accuracy of the data. So hopefully we want both, and let's say we will use the AND, so both of them to come up with a final value. So the second step would be a kind of trust model representation that defines the relationships between the entities, so the vehicle in front and the vehicle behind, and the sensors of the vehicle. So here in this figure, X is the sensor producing the data from vehicle B. Vehicle B has a trust relationship to its own sensor, of course, which is stronger since it's inside its own vehicle. And then vehicle A will form its own opinion on the trust from the data from X. And it also has its own opinion on the vehicle B, which is the sender of the data. So it will have this kind of what I said earlier, discount of how much A trusts B. So all this relationship building, we call it trust model, and then we create this kind of mathematical expression where we merge, we discount, and we fuse things all based on all these opinions that all these boxes here are calculating for each other. The third step would be the evidence collection, which is the okay. For example, we have some examples here. It's not really important. Some of them are about the communication channel integrity, or some others about the source integrity, like the execution, tested execution isolation, or things like that. What is a little bit more important here is, after you collect the evidence, is how you compute the opinions about the trust. And this is, again, subjective logic is giving different options. We have taken some examples, but the methodology really doesn't depend on specific equations. But for example, the most simple way would be to count the number of positive evidence and the number of negative evidence, and bring them together in these mathematical equations that I have here. And for example, we have split it in two different scenarios. In the first scenario, we have two positive evidence, for example. From this table, let's say two of these evidence are counting as positive and one as negative. So you calculate the final opinion, which is a kind of triplet in kind of probabilistic theory. It's not very important, but we will turn it in one number very soon. And in the second scenario, we have only three positive evidence and no negative evidence. So if we take these two different scenarios and we calculate the opinions given these equations, at the end, maybe to simplify things, we have this ATL, and we turn it to a number by calculating the projected probability, which is one number at the end from 0 to 1. And in the first scenario, where we had one negative evidence, the trust level is smaller than the second scenario where we had three positive evidences and no negative one. So we, just for the sake of example, we have calculated these two numbers for two different scenarios. So later, when we calculate the RTL in Alex's example, we will compare this number, which is the ATL, with the RTL and say, yeah, it falls inside our tolerance level or not for braking. Okay, so just to show also briefly the overall architecture, component architecture perspective of calculating this ATL. So we have somehow to manage and these trust models that I was referring to from the beginning, which we have this trust model manager. We also have another component that is responsible for gathering the evidence and encoding it and calculating it as opinions. And then we have the TLE, the trustworthiness level expression engine, which is doing mostly the subjective logic functionality. And all of them are coordinated by the middle entity here, the manager, the trust assessment manager, who is taking the final information to turn it to this trust level value and give it to the trust decision engine, which will decide bigger or smaller than the RTL. So it's a kind of comparison engine, very simple, yes or no, smaller or bigger than RTL. This architecture here is implemented by Connect, as I said, and you can find it as open source implementation on GitHub. This is the link. So all of it is open source. One can play with it, extend it, implement it, and try to advance it even further. But the components, the basic components, are already there, which I think is a good starting point for further projects. So what we spent some time in the white paper was to discuss, okay, we have this high-level methodology, I would say. A lot of things are not fixed, but the question is, what do we need to fix, and specifically from standardization perspective? For example, we need to have some kind of common understanding for templates for trust objects, for the trust models, to be able to describe the relationships in a common way, or how to phrase the trust expressions that I showed earlier, quantification functions, also procedures for updating the ATL, because like I said, this is an update, this is a dynamic process. So you keep receiving data. So how do you update your trust assessment as time goes by? So many other things. We have made a very nice list, I think, also for RTL and for ATL. And it's the base for discussions on next working items, maybe how to really bring ecosystem partners to agree on these things, so that the methodology can actually work between different partners, ecosystem partners, different domains. Yeah, so that was my presentation. I hope I'm on time, and I will pass it to Alex to continue with the RTL.
Okay, so thank you, Yannis. So as Yannis already said, so we go over to the RTL side. So I'm a very visual-driven guy. I like to explain things like in pictures. Yannis explained a lot about how ATL is being created, and ATL is an opinion of about some question of trustworthiness of some system element, and this opinion is basically located within this triangle here. To the top, you see rising uncertainty. So the more uncertain an opinion is, the higher it is up. If the opinion is more to the right, it's we put in more belief. So you see a lot of dots based on the analysis and methodology that Yannis described. And to the left, we tend towards more disbelieving this opinion. So with this methodology, we are starting to measure many things in the system and get a lot of opinions. And depending on our question, we need to decide which opinions are good enough for our functions to continue operating as specified, or when might we need to take responsive actions to maybe degrade our functionality to keep the people on the road safe. So what we did in our methodology, so we looked at this to be as a task to be fulfilled or executed at design time, when we specify actual requirements to design our systems, and in that same way we define requirements for the required level of trustworthiness. And these requirements are basically 3 thresholds, which are carving out an area within this triangle. So we state basically for certain questions, what is our requirement here on belief? So which level of belief do we need to accept? So it's basically this part here. On top of that, we can also say what is our required level of certainty or uncertainty. So how much uncertainty do we allow, and how much disbelief do we allow? And if you combine all of these 3 thresholds, you get in the end one final area, which is then the required level of trustworthiness. So you need to understand that this combination of these thresholds can be decided by the system designer. So it's not meant that you need to apply all 3 thresholds at the same time. But you can also say, I can continue only based on uncertainty or only based on belief. But the more thresholds you apply, the stricter your rules will be at the end. Also, all 3 thresholds are derived independently, so based on the same data input, but calculated independently. Companies can decide which of these thresholds to include in RTL, and as said, the more thresholds, the stricter. And also, we do, in our methodology, we don't prescribe specific calculation functions, but our functions need to be understood as example functions. Our methodology introduces the general way on how to do this, but every company can implement their own scheme and decide on details. So some companies want to be more cautious and stricter on what to accept as trustworthiness, and some are more relaxed, also depending maybe on the use case. So now let's get a bit more complicated and into the details. So first threshold is about belief. So we at design time, we take the technical system model. Then the scope. The scope, as Yannis already mentioned, is basically the question what our assessment is basically about. So which artifact in the system are we considering, and what are like side effects if something goes wrong and so on. What are the things connected? Then we use something that we already do in cybersecurity development. We do risk assessments. And we use the outcome of the risk assessment to get the list of relevant risks. So which risks are relevant for our item or our data item that we are currently evaluating. Then we apply a threshold calculation, and this will give us the belief threshold. Basically, it is so the threshold depends basically on the risks relevant for the scope, and the higher the residual risk. Residual means after applying the security concept, the remaining risks that we cannot drive down anymore that are systematic, the higher the required belief. So the more the final risk will be, the more we need evidence in the system that everything is fine. The lower the remaining risk is, the more we can basically trust the system, and the less we require this kind of evidence. I don't want to go into the details of these formulas here, but the basic gist is, so we do take the maximum risk considering our item, we reverse it and apply some threshold and so on. So don't care about the details. The next threshold is about disbelief. So what do we, so how much disbelief can we accept in the system? So again, same approach. So we start with the risk assessment and scope, list of relevant risks. Then instead of the residual risk, we look into the impact analysis. And based on this impact, we calculate our disbelief threshold. So the basic assumption is that now we consider that an attack is successful, and how bad is it then for the system? So the higher the impacts of a successful attack, the stricter the stance on disbelief. So meaning lower threshold. For this, we look into the usual impact categories, of course, safety, privacy, economic, and operational impact. So safety means, of course, somebody is being hurt, or maybe even dying. Privacy means some personal information could be leaked or sent to somebody untrustworthy. Economic impact, so a vehicle or assets are damaged and need to be repaired. So you have financial damages at the end. And operational, something is not working anymore. Maybe the function shuts down, or maybe the vehicle is broken. We look into this in the formula. So basically, it looks complicated, but it's quite easy actually. So we look at these impacts here. So all of these 4 impacts here are these I here. Every of these will be assigned a weight. So for some use cases or some companies, safety could be highly relevant. Others are more interested in privacy impacts. All of these are summed up, and this sum is at maximum 1. And then we reverse it to get our threshold again at the end. So the higher the impact is, the sum, the higher the threshold is at the end, the more stricter we are. Finally, uncertainty threshold. This is now getting a bit more complicated. This is going 2 ways. So again, we use the risk assessment, but instead of the risks, we look into assurance levels. So in cybersecurity, automotive engineering, we have something called cybersecurity assurance levels. So the higher a certain risk of a system is, the more assurance you need to provide during the development time. So in more details, this means more detailed specification, more rigorous testing, and so on. And all of this will be then at the end certified with this certain level of assurance. Something similar is also available for safety based on HARA. At the end, you have the ASIL certifications. But assurance, we felt, is not enough for our assessment here. So we look into also detectability. So if something goes wrong in the system, do we actually have sensors or some evidence in place that can show us that something is actually going wrong? Just having highest level of assurance, but going completely blind is not good enough in our opinion. So therefore, we combine both assurance levels and detectability in the uncertainty threshold calculation. And we do this, then the combination here is based on some table here. So here we have the assurance levels. From security of the CAL, for safety it would be the ASIL, in my opinion. And detectability, we also cut into 3 levels. So low is, so we have basic detectors or are completely absent, not fully extend to the core system. Then we have detectors are more present and cover larger parts of the system, and highest is mostly covered. So, and you see this with high detectors and high and low required assurance level, we have a very high uncertainty threshold. Then we do some mapping to get our threshold again for the RTL calculation. So all of this is kind of very complicated, I assume. So we decided to give you some examples here how this also shows with our AEB use case. So we have cut here 4 different scenarios. So we show how ATL and RTL link in this use case. So for each scenario, we increase the number of evidence that is negative about a system, so reducing the level of trust in the system. We have the ATL here calculated for all of these different evidence scenarios. And here you see the image representation of the evaluation. So here in blue, you see the RTL, which is fixed for all of these 4. And then you see that with all evidence positive, so 0 negative evidence, everything is fine. So the dot is here within the trustworthy area. With 1 negative evidence, it starts already moving a bit to the better side, but still good enough. And then with 2 and 3, we are moving out of the allowed area, and we are considering the situation not trustworthy. And with this, we are triggering then a responsive action, like not braking in case, for example, a denim says we should brake. So we need to be more careful and then maybe trust our internal sensors more, or the other way with trustworthy. So then an incoming denim can also trigger an automated brake action. And with this, I'm done with my presentation. Oh, this is some remainder slides. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Yanis and Alexander. Much appreciated. And the slides were extremely informative. We've got a few questions that we can already get started with, but please, for all of those in the audience, if you do have any comments or questions for either of our speakers, please do put them in the Q&A chat now, and we will go through them. So the first one for you, Yanis, is whether the methodology that you've presented in your presentation, whether this can be applied to different technological domains, or if it is very much specific to the V2X messages.
No, like I said in the beginning, it's a very generic methodology. Actually, the methodology itself, it doesn't have to be applied in a V2X context, right? So it can also be used wherever we have the need to assess trustworthiness, to quantify trust on something, on an entity or on a data. And for example, we have applied it also in AI for vehicles, where we, for example, want to assess the trustworthiness of the training data set for the AI algorithms. So we have some papers published recently from our team in Huawei, where we saw how to apply it for understanding the trustworthiness of the training data set from the perspective of bias, for example, because it has been shown that bias in this training data set can also affect the result of autonomous driving functions and create accidents at the end. Or it can also be used in assessing the trustworthiness of the output of the AI itself. This is also something we are working. So the concept, basically, the core concepts of all these are the same with the methodology we described here. So I think there's a lot of value in this kind of methodology. That's why we have kept it very generic. At least in the white paper, we put extra effort in describing it in a generic way. And maybe what is more specific would be how you apply it. Yeah, especially for example, for the RTL, the kind of risk assessment processes that Alex described are more specific to automotive domain, or for the ATL, the kind of evidence and trust sources you want to use, that could be more specific to the automotive domain or the V2X domain more specifically, but the methodology basically doesn't change.
Thank you very much. You actually preempted another question, which was asking for specifics when it comes to AI. I don't know if you could elaborate any further on, say, potential changes that would need to be made, that should be made, and particularly for general technology evolution moving forward, you know.
Well, again, yes, maybe this opens up a different discussion, but I think my general comments are basically have answered to this question. But then it becomes a more discussion to a different direction about AI. But I would say I would suggest that we create a new working item in 5JEA for this kind of discussion, how to apply it in specific AI algorithms and data sets, like I said, because one, for example, just to say one interesting thing, in my opinion at least, is that here, this methodology we discussed is about us, putting some trust value on one specific data item. But if you have a training data set and your property you want to assess it for is bias, bias is not a property for one data item, it's a property for a set of items, a set of data. Then, here is where you need to elevate the methodology to capture properties of a data set, not of one data. Or if you want to assess the output of one AI algorithm, then you need to understand how trust propagates from the training data set through the algorithm itself to the output. So this is okay. These are for sure new research happening right now, but it might be interesting for the automotive domain also.
Thank you very, very much, Yanis. We've got another question. This one I think is more angled towards yourself, Alexander. It's piggybacking a little bit. It's a little bit similar to what Yanis has spoken about, but it's to maybe go into a bit more details regarding the role of how this could be used, how this could be applied more specifically to safety. Obviously, this is looking very much at trust, but there's been a lot of work in the past on safety. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that specifically? Alex, sorry, you're on mute. We don't hear you.
Sorry, now hopefully better. So, okay, of course. So, safety is at the core of what we are doing in automotive security, in automotive engineering, and therefore it's very important. So, in the work item, we also looked into safety a bit. So, we defined our own scope for safety. So, this included, of course, a different set of evidence for the ATL calculations. Also, then for risk assessment, we did use HARA instead of TARA. And it looks like everything lines up. So it looks fine from our security point of view, but safety experts still need to confirm that this actually makes sense. It looks good, but yeah, we need it needs proper evaluation from experts.
Thank you very, very much. I see time is running out. I want to try to get to as many questions as I can. So we received another saying, asking, beyond the level of uncertainty, is there a kind of quote unquote confidence interval for belief and disbelief? So in other words, is the ATL a fixed value with all three components fixed as well, or is it a value with some delta, with some possible change? Same question for the RTL. Is the surrounding of the inside triangle DUV floating? Is it fixed? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more?
Yanis, would you go first?
But to my understanding, it's this confidence interval is or fluctuation affects more the RTL as I understand it. I mean, it's already in the ATL. It's already incorporated inside the concept of uncertainty. So yes, so it's already in.
Yes, so in RTL, I just addressed it as thresholds. So basically, these thresholds are just one end of the interval. So the RTL is about intervals, while the ATL is about a concrete assessment outcome. And the uncertainty, as it already says, reflects this kind of inaccuracy in the assessment. So no additional need for intervals, I believe.
Thank you. We are in the last minute, so rather than try to get through, we can send any additional questions through to Yanis and Alexander, and I can guarantee that you will. I'll communicate the answer via email. In this last minute, I would like to invite you all to check out the white paper that really delves into the details of what both Yanis and Alexander discussed today, and provides much more information that you can go through at your own time. And of course, if there are any comments, questions, requests for further information, please feel free to reach out to the 5J Secretariat, and we'll do our best to direct you accordingly. Alex and Yanis, I don't know if you would like to say a final last word, a final thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Yes, for the invitation today. It was really nice. And again, I want to encourage everyone for reading the white paper, but also continuing the discussion for future working items. There's a lot of space to explore here.
Yes, so same for me. So thank you very much. And I think here with this, we laid a lot of groundwork for future research. And I think this is a very promising topic to expand on.
Thank you very much to both of you, not just for today, but of course, for the enormous and very valuable contribution that you have made through this work item and the hard work that you put into it. It's very, very much appreciated. I'm seeing a lot of applauses being sent by the attendees, so it's obviously a position that's shared by many. Thank you very, very much. And just to reiterate once more to all of the attendees, your more questions, comments are more than welcome. Please don't hesitate to reach out to the secretary, and we'll make sure that we get the answers that you require. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for making the time and joining today, and to have a very pleasant rest of the week and weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.